So my name is Richard Evans. I am currently an assistant council commissioner and a unit commissioner here in Crossroads of the West Council. I've had the opportunity to be a scouter. Yeah, I was just thinking about it just yesterday, that in a few weeks on Memorial Day, it will be my 50th anniversary in the Scouts, either as a boy or as an adult leader as well. So I've been at this for quite some time as well. I've had to travel around a lot, been in a number of different councils, and have been a commissioner for quite a number of years. Today's class is going to be dealing with serving newly formed units. And I will try not to get off the track too much. One of the issues that we had with this course, why it hasn't been taught before, is there isn't a whole lot of meat on the bones, and I hope to be able to put a little bit of that in there. And I certainly wish to have any information or insights from you as we go along. And hopefully we'll have a few opportunities to do that. I think we shall. So, as I said, this is MCS 307. It is serving newly formed units. The general concept is an engaged commissioner is critical for the success and retention of new units. Commissioners designated as the new unit commissioner focus on only new units, preferably a single unit to which they have been assigned. This is the kind of the laundry list of our course objectives. Define the role of the new unit commissioner, understand the partnership between the new unit commissioner, recognize the importance of the unit service plan, understanding how coaching supports new units, and identify new unit commissioner training opportunities. But you know, something that I would like to add to this right now is understanding why it is that we put so much emphasis on new units and why we put so much emphasis on the new unit commissioner. Something that we don't necessarily think about a lot of the times, because we've been in scouting for quite some time, is that oftentimes with a new unit, the individuals that are there and are starting up that new unit have little or no understanding of the scouting program at all. And it's important that we as commissioners remember when we didn't know anything about it either. So oftentimes, if you don't have a new unit commissioner present and helping to coach along and to give advice and to listen and to pay attention and observe, it almost becomes a blind leading the blind situation. And it's very, very important. But really, oftentimes, the only person who is present for that unit is the new unit commissioner. Because of that, it is necessary that a new unit commissioner be present significantly more often than you will see with a well-established unit. Oftentimes, you'll only be meeting them maybe once, twice a month at the most. Oftentimes, you will be meeting with a new unit considerably longer than that. And the reason is because they oftentimes do not know exactly where to go. So, what is a new unit exactly? A new unit is one that has been formed recently or has been meeting for less than 3 years. Okay. The unit might also be described as a novice to the scouting program. I referred to that a few moments ago. A unit that has dropped and been restarted can also be described as new. That is an important one, and I've actually run into this quite a number of times. Oftentimes, the reason why it dropped was because they didn't have a new unit commissioner, or they really didn't know how things were going, and the unit failed. But then they decided to give it another go. Well, they're going to be behaving much like a new unit behaves as well. And so oftentimes that you can work with those as though that they were new units. Some new units don't make it to their 3rd year. How many of those units might have been saved if they'd been assigned a commissioner dedicated to new units? who actually help them? And that's really the question and what we're trying to solve here today, or at least get some ideas on how to solve that. So what is a new unit commissioner? So let me just ask you in general, and I don't have my chat up right now and all the rest of that stuff. So go ahead and blurt it out a little bit. So I'm not going to list these on a whiteboard or anything as the class recommends, because, well, it really doesn't work as well here in Zoom. But what are some of the traits of a new unit commissioner?
They've got to know their stuff, because they've really got to support the new unit and be able to answer the questions.
I recognize that voice. That's Chad. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
I think the new unit commissioner needs to be someone that is really enthusiastic and that is a connector. So someone that is able to match needs with resources. I think that's the main thing. Like they said, I think Chad said, people don't know what they don't know. They don't know where to go. So, we need to be really aware of what, the resources are, where the training is, and all these other things, so we can point people in the right direction. And I think also, in my experience, one of the things that we needed to have also is a lot of patience, because a lot of times we need to say the same thing over and over again to the same people. And, that can be a little bit frustrating. So patience is required.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Well, there's a few ideas here, and I must admit, I agree with every one of those. One of the things that you want to do is make sure that the person who becomes a new unit commissioner, this is especially directed towards our district commissioners and our assistant district commissioners in charge of unit commissioners, is to make sure that you assign a person who is experienced. And that experience level can be pretty varied. I have been working with new units for a long, long time. And my experience was I was an assistant scoutmaster, I was a scoutmaster, and I was a roundtable commissioner as well. Here's the interesting part about this. I have never been on a member of a committee, ever. I do understand the basic principles of what a committee does, and in general, and all the rest of that stuff. And as was mentioned a moment ago, I know where to go to get resources, to help a person. But my knowledge of committee work is relatively limited. Okay, so am I better or worse? Not really. My experience as a scoutmaster and as a venture advisor and things like that helps me considerably and gives me the confidence. And also, because I was in that role, I have a basic understanding of what kinds of things that are necessary for a troop to operate. So you don't want to jump in or have a person jump in as a new unit commissioner that really doesn't understand scouting and doesn't have that kind of experience. This is a specialized role. And we'll talk a little bit in a little while about why this is such a specialized role. But really, this is much more focused, and it is quite different than the nature of a commissioner, a normal unit commissioner for a well-established unit. And you also need to be committed. And when I say committed, it really does take approximately 3 years for a unit to get itself well established and be considered an old established unit. And as such, having that same unit commissioner there during that time is very, very important. So how's a new unit commissioner different from a traditional one? We just talked about that. The roles are similar in that they are both coaches and mentors, but the new unit commissioner is involved in the unit organization process. While it is typical and acceptable for most unit commissioners to be assigned to several units and have a longer tenure, due to the length and intensity of service, a new unit commissioner should only be assigned to one unit. That's especially true when you have not worked with new units extensively. when the new unit commissioner's first unit has reached 12 months tenure, he or she might be able to support a second brand new unit. By that time, the first new unit reaches 24 months tenure. The new unit commissioner is usually ready for a second unit. So what's really going on here? And what are we talking about? And why is this so terribly important? Well, think about nature of that new unit just coming in raw, and they don't really know what's going on. They may have adult leaders who may have had some experience as scouts, maybe a little bit with as scout leaders and stuff like that, but have never organized a unit before. They really don't know the different kinds of roles that exist inside of there. And what's more is oftentimes you don't have youth who are leaders in themselves. After all, if it's a new unit, oftentimes they don't have anyone other than scouts and tinderling. So how in the world are they going to be youth leaders? Well, they have to be kind of guided and worked with along that time. Oftentimes, the scoutmaster becomes something of a leader, but it is important that he is developing those scouts and getting them to the point where they are the leaders. But what if the scoutmaster doesn't know how to do that? Well, that's where the new unit commissioner comes in, and that's where they can help. It's the same thing with a committee chairman. They understand, okay, so I'm here, but what do I do? What am I supposed to be doing? What kinds of different positions are necessary? And they may not know any of those kinds of things. And so oftentimes nothing happens, and they can't figure out why in the world they don't have funding or why advancement isn't getting reported. All those little administrative details that exist inside of the committee. Even the COR may have no familiarity at all with how this program actually works. And so we as new unit commissioners have to be pretty specialized in helping them to learn these things so that they're standing on their own. So a new unit without an assigned commissioner are at risk of not making it to the third year. And if you think about all those problems that I just kind of listed off there, you can understand why this can be such a problem. After all, it's easy to start a unit on paper, but they drop quickly without support, and if they really don't know what needs to get done. New unit commissioners can provide the extra attention needed for units to develop into high-performing units. When a new unit is organized, the BSA has made a promise to those families that their sons and daughters would have a top-quality scouting experience that they cannot get anywhere else. It is a promise that really needs to be kept. And experienced unit commissioners often say it is much more exciting to raise a unit in the way it should go than to monitor an existing unit. I mean, that's absolutely true. But going back to that promise that we made, in a very real sense, yes, the district executive was the individual who helped to get that unit established. But who really is going to execute on that promise? It's the new unit commissioner. That's the person who's right on the front line. That doesn't mean that new unit commissioners are all by themselves. Of course not. As was mentioned before, we have resources to use, but we are that face. And we're the ones who need to ensure that that promise of good scouting is going to take place. So who would make a good new unit commissioner? Often, we've already kind of explained a little bit of this. Experienced commissioners who specialize in new unit service and have had some additional training, such as Wood Badge or College of Commissioner Science, things like that. A commissioner with a reduced unit workload, or one who is able to provide extra attention. I mean, an example of that is with myself. I retired 2 years ago. And I was a unit commissioner prior to that time and stuff like that. But as a retiree, really, my intention as a retiree was to work with the council and with Scouts BSA. That was my idea of what I wanted to do. Sure, I'm doing other things and stuff like that, but that was really my goal. So I can spend that extra amount of time. But other people who are still raising families, working and stuff like that, they can't necessarily take on this enormous load with 2 or 3 units. So in addition, a commissioner needs to be skilled at coaching and mentoring. The role the new unit commissioner plays is much like that of a troop guide, not a member of the unit, but a member who helps the unit leadership become a highly performing team. For example, one new unit that I was working with down in Arizona, it was actually, they'd existed for about a year and they were in trouble. They were. They started out with about 6 or 7 scouts and they dropped down to 4. They were about ready to just throw in the towel when I was asked to step in and see what I could do. And I spent an enormous amount of time. I mean, more than just going to like unit meetings and committee meetings. Okay. I was going on campouts and hikes and things like that and working with them that closely. And it was important. And I was able to establish, this was mentioned in our last hour, a good relationship with the scoutmaster, with the committee chair, the other members of the adults who were present there. And it was very, very helpful, but it was very, very time intensive. And I mean, commissioner needs to be committed for those 3 years. I've mentioned that a few times, but it is important that they understand that, hey, got to be there for that whole time while you're working with them. So let's go back a little bit to how the unit organizes. And we're going to talk about this a little bit. And I've discussed this. Alan, who is present right now, was our council commissioner before. He and I talked about this, and going to be discussing this with Brett as well. But how does this organization, how does a unit organize, and where does the commissioner kind of slip in? Well, the new unit organization works closely with the institutional head or executive officer of the chartered organization to put together a strong team. That is true. The new unit commissioner supports that effort and strives to become a familiar face to that group. Now, this is very important, and oftentimes it is forgotten. And as commissioners, we need to be a tad forceful with our own council commissioner, our own district commissioners, and with the district executive to ensure that you get on the ground early in the organizational phase of the new organization that's being established, whether it be a troop or a crew or a pack, or a combination thereof. This is critically important because oftentimes, and this has happened to me at times, I have been assigned to a new unit 2, 3, or 4 months after it organized. They may have already started going down difficult roads. They may have already made decisions that are not necessarily the best for their units, or they may have just been kind of flying blind. And it could have caused some difficulties for them. You want to be there at the organizing point. Now, what happens if the organization fails? And it never actually happens. This does happen. It happens relatively often where a group of people would like to put together a troop that they just can't make it happen. And you were involved in it. Okay, you didn't spend an enormous amount of time on that. No sweaty duh. Go on to the next unit. But if it does organize, now you're committed and you're in there. And the people already know who you are and why you're there, instead of being months after the fact. So this kind of covers a lot of the responsibilities that I was talking about. Organizing and recruiting, encouraging training. This is very, very important, that the people start with their training process early on. Oftentimes in the organization process, this kind of gets forgotten. The people are so busy trying to just get things established that they're not thinking ahead already. They need to be thinking ahead. And it's kind of the new unit commissioner's job to, well, the executive's thinking we need to get your unit established within the next month or two. But the new unit commissioner is already thinking a year out and where you would like them to be. And that's a lot to do with how succession plans work and how Journey to Excellence. I'm only spending a little bit of extra time on Journey to Excellence in just a few moments. So relationships between the new unit commissioner and a new member coordinator, and this would be like your district executive, got to work together well, got to know each other. I have known, for example, my DE here, Nita Orgel, I have known her for years. We understand one another, we can talk to one another, and we both know what it is that we're trying to get done with our units. So it's very important that if you're going to be a new unit commissioner, actually any commissioner, you need to know your DE and you need to be on the same sheet of music. So what about unit service and what you're doing? The new unit commissioner will need to contact the unit more than once a month. This is kind of standard for established units, not so much with new units. Talked about that before. And oftentimes it's in different kinds of environments. Unit meetings, camporees, committee meetings, PLCs, all kinds of different ways that you may be meeting with them. And then there may be individual meetings with the unit key 3. And as a matter of fact, that's a really good idea, so that everyone is on the same sheet of music. What you will find oftentimes is you're going to be asked as a new unit commissioner for advice. Be prepared, but also be prepared to listen and understand the way they want to do scouting. It's a very, very wide road, and you can weave around inside of that road and still be doing good scouting. So be aware of the different subtleties that are going to be available to them and how they would like to approach their scouting organization. So what about the unit service plan? Not going to spend a huge amount of time on this one because in our next hour, we have a class on the unit service plan. Actually sitting in on it, I'm going to be the instructor's helper inside of there because I am so interested in that very point. But one point that I would like to make, this is an area that is kind of an interesting one when it comes to how to establish these and what they really look like. Most of you, if you have been around for a while, know what a unit service plan is. It's basically the plan that the unit has. Normally it's a 1 year or up out to a 3-year plan on how things are going to develop. Some of you who have been unit commissioners are familiar with what a detailed assessment is. That's something that you do in commissioners tools when you've gone through the details of a unit with the unit key 3. And many of you are familiar with Journey to Excellence. Here's something interesting that you may not have seen before. And that is that Journey to Excellence, the unit service plan, and the detailed assessment are really the same things. They are really talking about the same things. And this can be an enormous benefit to how you actually approach working with a unit.
Richard,
Hopefully,
we got some comments in the chat that we ought to take a second and talk about. Liza Rosie, you had some comments. Will you take a second and do those? And then Rick, you commented on something that she said.
Okay, so I don't think I was fully trained when I was the last woman standing on the roundtable commissioner panel. A second commissioner was finally recruited, but I'm the one seeking additional training with classes such as these, the online training on myscouting.com or org, whichever it is. The rest of my experience comes from being a den leader and assistant cub master. And then I said, before I was left as the last woman standing, I tried to help out a struggling pack, but the leaders didn't want to do it anymore. And they were looking to dump everything on me and the other commissioner who had also stepped in to help. When COVID hit, they used it as an excuse to dissolve, and they're still dissolved.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that's a lot.
Well, I think a lot of that we've covered parts of those as we go. Rick had a great comment too, though. I believe it was Rick. He says we need to make sure that we don't take over as a new unit commissioner, that we support them. And I think some of the people have been following the chats as we go. So if you
and that's why I told him, I said, I'm here to help. I'm here to facilitate. I'm not here to do it for you. I'm not here to take over. And that wasn't what they were looking for. They wanted to just dump everything on my lap and walk away. And I'm like, I can't run it by myself. I have to have help, and, we need to be doing this as a team. And they wouldn't share the load they had. They insisted on still doing stuff their way and not using me for a resource. And so, I helped out where I could, but like I said, when COVID hit, they just use it for an excuse to dissolve.
Yes. As a unit commissioner, one of the things that you, as a new unit commissioner, is you are not there to run the organization. And that needs to be clear up front. And oftentimes, what will happen is that because people don't really know what roles they're supposed to have, they're not really sure. And then one individual gets overloaded and others really don't get involved and things like that. And that's where, that early start, where people start to become, where they understand where they are and what their roles are. Our roles as unit commissioners is coaching and service. It is not to take over the unit.
Exactly.
And I have had that situation where, a lot of times a person, they see somebody from a higher level, and district is higher than troop, and they think, oh, you must be the person in charge. No, that is not how this hierarchy works. We are service above the troop level or above the crew or above the pack. We are not in charge. And we are never in charge, nor are we inspectors. That's just not what we're there for. And so it's very important that they understand that aspect. Alan, go ahead. What's another one that popped up?
I think we've covered most of. Mike had key leaders not recruiting help soon enough, and I made a note to talk about that we need, as a new unit commissioner, we need to teach units how to recruit and where the recruits should come from.
And not only recruiting, but to maintain that relationship with their chartered organization. I see a lot of units really struggle because there isn't a relationship there with that chartered organization. So it can make it harder than it should be.
Mm-hmm. Those are really good questions, and they are very common problems. Oftentimes, it is a common problem, especially if you get in with a new unit that you got in late with, 2, 3, or 4 months down the line, because now the folks are in hip deep, perhaps neck deep, perhaps over the nose, and they're beginning to struggle a little bit by that time. That's one of the reasons why we definitely want to get involved as early as possible so that they do understand it and they do start to become comfortable. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of discuss this. Hopefully, most of you have seen the JTE standards and things like that. I love JTE. I think it's very, very important. Because they are the three are very, very similar to one another. They are very, very valuable in that the JTEs are easy to read, easy to understand, simple bullet points. What I oftentimes have done, and this has been very effective, is I introduce JTE early, and then actually introduce the bronze level plan and offer this as an outline to the unit service plan. And so basically the key three establish their unit service plan based upon the bronze level of the JTEs. This gets them going and it gets them comfortable with it. They also get comfortable with what a unit service plan looks like. Then for the second year, a silver level. And then for the third year, gold level. By the time that they are up to the point where they're actually working on the unit service plan for the silver level, they are much more comfortable with this whole environment. And they don't have really too much trouble with it. What's more is because it has those key bullet points of how to organize the committee, what the scouts should be doing, and how their program should be operating. All of those details are already there. It sets their mind into what you might call scouting mode and how the organization works. I have found this to be very effective. Now, I've had units that have poo-pooed this and they have decided, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it our own way. And they have struggled for longer. But those new units that I have worked with that have followed this invariably have had a much better experience and oftentimes are well established by the end of their third year. All right, so who benefits from coaching in this kind of an environment? Well, as a new unit commissioner, you will probably have opportunities to coach leaders through situations they may not be comfortable handling on their own. And we were talking about that before, that comfort level that gets lost once they get hip deep inside of that. And you can actually get in there and help with them. And everyone can gain from coaching. In this particular case, it would be new leaders, experienced leaders, members of the unit committee, and possibly the chartered organization. So what are some of these benefits that you could have to there? And I'm just going to kind of go through a few of these. One of the most important ones is that they need to be able to solve their own problems. As mentioned before, we are not the leaders. We are coaches. We are mentors, helpers. We are providing service. They need to solve their own problems and improve their skills and performance themselves. And they need to be able to develop that confidence. Oftentimes, they don't have that kind of confidence starting out because they've never done anything like this before. Scouting is an unusual organization. And so it's oftentimes very different, and it's unique and gets people out of their comfort zones. It also benefits you as a new unit commissioner. You can develop a lot of skills, how to negotiate, problem solve, learn advanced skills, demonstrate commitment, get personal satisfaction, and boy, watching a troop turn around or build up to a settled one that is well established, it's quite an experience. I still communicate with one of my earliest scoutmasters that I worked with, where I turned the unit around. We're still friends, and it's been years and years, and the troop's still going strong. And we talked about relationship building in the last hour. This ties into it. Development of trust, mutual respect, appreciating diversity, open communication, and becoming more mindful of other people's points of view. All terribly important in supporting new units. It is important that a commissioner be an expert coach while they're working. And how to coach, after all, in a football game, the coach is not out there throwing the football. He is on the sidelines coaching the players. And that's why it's important that you be a good coach, not a leader. Although commissioners may sometimes need to supply the right answer, more often than not, coaching involves helping people think through their situations and formulate their own solutions. It is very important that the people get out there and get trained. And there are different levels of training that exist. And really, you want them to be experiencing all of them. Obviously, there's the training that exists out there in my scouting. And those are the basic ones, the ones that you get so that you get the train patch and all the rest of that kind of stuff. don't get me wrong. I have been through those. I've been through many of them before. Been through as a council commissioner and as a district commissioner, a whole bunch of them, and they are very, very good, but they are very high level and very generic. Going to a scouting U, especially we just had one a few weeks ago, especially one that is local to your council, gives you a slightly more in-depth experience, and you can get involved in that. And what I'm talking about is your unit leaders taking these. Then at the district level, there are roundtables, and that's your next level of training that's available to you. Roundtable is a combination of shared experiences and training at the same time, but it is much more focused to the specific kinds of things that the district is doing. And so, and the problems that the district may have. Also, it gives you an opportunity, gives the leaders an opportunity to make contact and talk to their district resources. If it is at all possible, you want to, as a unit commissioner, you want to go to the roundtables as well, so that you have this collaboration going on. And then there's council level training. Quite a lot is offered. I mean, one of them is right here, but we also have other kinds of trainings that are available. It's important that your unit leaders get those kinds of trainings. Now, oftentimes, if they feel like they are being overwhelmed with so much work, it's important that they separate the load and take the time to get that kind of training. Scouting is different, and running a scouting organization is different. And having that unit training, taking the time to do so, is very important. And it's our job as new unit commissioners to get out there and help them and encourage them to take that extra training. Commissioner training. Well, yeah, we need that as well. I went to Scouting U myself just a few weeks ago. I've got my wood badge as well. It's important that we have our training and keep up to date so that we are familiar with the programs and the changes. I took all of those training things about 6 or 7 years ago, and I guess about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I did it all over again. Of course, I had just retired, so I had plenty of time. So I went ahead and did that during the day so I could get away with something like that. It is important that you take refresher courses and see what kinds of changes are going on. Stay up with these kinds of things. There's a whole bunch of resources out there, manuals, all the rest of that kind of stuff. These are all out at scouting, at the scouting website under the commissioner training manuals and resources. Jump out there and grab a hold of them. I'm old and I liked having books. It's kind of unfortunate that I can't get books any longer. They simply aren't printed out. But these are available to you. A lot of people prefer to just carry around their Kindle and have them right there. I'm still kind of a paper person. There's also a unit roadmap for starting, sustaining, and growing units. This also involves the kinds of 3 phases of long-term unit success. Not a big surprise. You will find that this unit roadmap looks almost exactly like JTE and unit service plans. They all are saying the same thing. There is a great deal of consistency. And that's because there is a great deal, 100 years of experience of learning how scouting organizations work well, and quite frankly, how sometimes they don't work well at all. And these kinds of different resources can help with these. Okay, so what do you do after your 36 months of tenure? Do you stick with the unit or do you not stick with the unit? That's a really interesting question. By the time you're done with your 3 years working with that unit, you are the only unit commissioner that they have probably been in contact with. Should you stay or should you go? I don't know. It really depends. One thing is there's a comfort level and they know you and they can talk to you and the relationship is very well established. On the other hand, Having somebody new come in can give new ideas and new perspectives. I don't know. Probably the best thing would be to discuss this with your district commissioner and with the unit key 3 to come up with what is comfortable for them and also comfortable for you. So that's a difficult question to answer. And I've run into that. Sometimes I've stayed, sometimes I've gone. Don't really know. Don't forget about all of the different people who are involved in this program. It's not just you. Just as with the key 3 and with the other leaders that are there, it's just not them. You're there for them, and these other folks are there for you as well, and they will support you. Your district chairman has their own district committee with people and with knowledge about, well, for example, if somebody had huge detailed questions with me about committee work and stuff like that, I can't answer them, but I can find a person that can answer it. And different kinds of administrative things that only a district executive has available to you, they can answer those kinds of questions as well. Don't forget, you are part of a team. You just happen to be right at the very front of that team. So in summary, we define the role of the new unit commissioner. We understand the partnership between that new unit commissioner and the new unit organization. We recognize the importance of it in order to ensure that the unit survives and thrives. We understand how coaching supports new unit leaders, and we identify new unit commissioner training and training opportunities. These are the areas that we covered. A lot of information that's inside of there. That's because new unit commissioners have a lot of stuff going on. So I only have just a few questions. Any other comments or questions that you may have?
I put in the chat, you can always print out the manual books if you want, put in a binder with sheet protectors, and that'll make it easier to swap out the updated pages.
Mike made a comment that a successful trained committee is more important than just a scoutmaster having training.
Yep, absolutely true. Absolutely true. We tend to, oftentimes, especially in this council, to focus so much on the scoutmaster, but it's a whole team, a whole organization that's out there. So, yes.